This is Radio Boston. I'm Sasha Pfeiffer.
And I'm Anthony Brooks. We're going to continue now with our series of conversations with the Massachusetts gubernatorial candidates. Today, Democrat Juliette Kayyem.
Kayyem went to Harvard Law School and served in the Department of Justice in the Clinton administration. In 2007, Governor Patrick appointed her the first Undersecretary for Homeland Security in Massachusetts. She then went on to work at the Federal Department of Homeland Security, where she dealt with counterterrorism issues and disaster response.
She's a former columnist for the Boston Globe and a former cable news terrorism expert. She's comfortable in front of the camera. Now she's here in front of a microphone to talk about her vision for Massachusetts. And Juliette Kayyem, welcome to Radio Boston. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure to have you in here. And I want to invite listeners into this conversation. You can call us. What's your question for Juliette Kayyem? What do you want to know about her politics, her economics, her plans for the future of Massachusetts? Give us a call, 800-423-8255. That's 800-423-TALK. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at Radio Boston. So, Juliette, tell us your first bid for elected office. Why governor? Why do you think this is the job for you?
Well, the challenges that this state faces are both are opportunities, actually. They are opportunities for a kind of leadership that integrates all the stakeholders to build a stronger and more prepared Massachusetts for the future. That is what I've done all of my public, when I worked in government, all of my career in government. And it's what I strive for in this campaign. So and the challenge of politics right now, I really think, and being new to politics, is you have to address the problems of today, but to be successful, we have to do so in a way that is going to make us more prepared, more resilient for the future. And people look at my bio and I'll say, the Homeland Security. Homeland Security is as much about the homeland. And it's keeping us as vibrant and strong and open and progressive as this state is, as it is about security, which is an important part of any leadership role. And so as people started to talk to me about it and I started to talk to others about it, my experiences in federal and state government, my experiences outside of government as a communicator, as you mentioned, were relevant for this big office. And I recognize that. But Massachusetts is also at a stage in which new leadership, a new generational shift, which I represent, I think we're open to. We're seeing it in Boston.
Well, let me ask you about that. 18 months at the Department of Homeland Security, working with state and local leaders on a variety of issues. I'm sure they're sort of relevant to some of what a governor has to deal with, but how does that experience, I guess, shape you, shape your vision of what kind of governor you would want to be? So
that's exactly right. My docket, as you want to say, was, I describe it as both defense and offense. So the defense side is pretty easy to understand, oil spills, hurricanes, H1N1, all of these what I call moments that happen to a governor or a president in which people look to government to work, and they don't care how you get there, right? They just want to be safe and secure. And that's an important part of what we expect of government, whatever the crisis may be, but looking actively towards the future. Look, I oversaw billions of dollars of budget, tens of thousands of first responders, and how I thought about management was that you actually have to plan ahead for a stronger society. So what I did on the state side, because a lot of people don't know the specifics, I oversaw the state's first Homeland Security plan, which dealt a lot with infrastructure investments, military investments, port investments. I oversaw the state's first interoperability plan, which guided tens of millions of dollars to cities and towns, which are at the forefront of almost anything that happens to a citizen here. And so I know how to work in this state, and I know what's important for the state's role, as well as supporting some of the amazing things going on in our cities and towns.
Well, I want to talk to you specifically about policy ideas, policy objectives. But before I do that, we just marked a moment ago, we are marking today 6 months after the Boston Marathon bombing. And because you have this background in Homeland Security, I want to ask you about that because, as you know, much of the city was locked down during those terrible days, that search for suspects. For the most part, I think most people applauded how the police, the FBI, the ATF all perform. But is it important to ask this question? How do we strike that balance between swift, effective, robust law enforcement and preserving an open society that some people might feel was somewhat sacrificed during those difficult days.
And I understand that sentiment. So my first response is there's no perfect answer. And as a governor, I will tell you that. I mean, that is, you cannot pretend that there's, and not to sort of, it's not a pun, but there's no finish line on figuring out how to best be secure, safe, open, free, and all the things we love about this vibrant state. So what you do is you learn as you go along. And so what's important is not only, and I supported the lockdown, the efforts by the governor and the mayor to protect citizens, and what people forget, to relieve public safety entities that had been working 24/7 for 6 days from having to deal with, a million people coming into the city. But you also learn from it, right? What could we have learned from the Joint Terrorism Task Force and what was or wasn't shared? What can we learn from the lockdown? Not only so we do better next time, let's hope there's not a next time, but there's major sporting events, there's major events throughout each of the states. So I'm a big fan of lessons learned. I've learned that in my career. Government can do good for its citizens, and let me tell you, government can always do better.
Well, let me ask you about, in terms of what we might have learned from that. In the wake of the attacks, the Boston Globe editorialized in favor of a full review of what happened, what led up to the bombings, the pursuit of the suspects that followed. We haven't had that review. You think that's a good idea? And what's the biggest question that you'd want answered in a review like that?
So I do. I would support a full review. I've always supported what's called, after actions. That's a military term, but for almost anything, right? So, and it doesn't just have to be this incident. It could be what we learn in education reform, or what we learn in job investments and job creation. There is always the capacity to learn. The problem with the reason why you want an overall review is because we had so many cities and towns involved, private sector, the BAA, everyone, that it would be helpful to have an outside sort of independent auditor provide us with lessons about us being the government, and the citizens lessons about how we would have done better. I think the biggest question I have related to that incident, those 5 days, is essentially what happened in the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I was on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. It's clear the FBI did not think much about their original review. That led to all the, everyone else not thinking much of it. And can we learn from that? But I'm not a big sort of, we could have stopped this, or we have to blame people. We should blame. We should learn if it's appropriate. But the reason why government needs to, sort of do that full circle and learn is because, guess what? Things like this will happen again. And it's just, and we just can't pretend that they won't.
Listeners, we're talking to Juliette Kayyem. She's a former Homeland Security official, both from Massachusetts and at the federal level. She's running for governor as a Democrat. You can join the conversation. 800-423-TALK, 800-423-8255 is the number to call. Juliette Kayyem, so what's on top of the Juliette Kayyem for Governor platform? What's the most important issue out there?
Well, rightfully, in the sense that I hope all the Democrats agree on this, right? So it's job creation and education, and where I really push hard as well as on infrastructure. So if I could start with the last one, because I do believe that infrastructure and infrastructure investments are the backbone, capillaries, arteries of any society. They connect us to each other. They connect us to the global economy. That is no joke. It is how we are going to survive and thrive in the future. When you look at the industries that are going to create job growth in the state, and I don't just mean Boston, you look at Lowell, New Bedford, you look at Worcester and Springfield, they are ones that are about connectivity, right? They are about investments in biotech and meds and military investments and port investments in terms of our infrastructure. So that is of primary importance to me. They create jobs today, but they also create jobs for the future. So infrastructure to me becomes a way to also invest in the future of Massachusetts in terms of schools and job creation. So we start with that foundation. In terms of jobs, as I said, I hope everyone's for job creation. I hope everyone's for, on our side, is for increasing the minimum wage and a lot of the progressive proposals out there. But what's too easy to get away with is sort of those slogans. I mean, I think it takes you have to be honest about the future of this state's industries, and what is going to thrive in Springfield is very, very different than what's going to thrive in Boston, or New Bedford or Lowell. And you have to invest in that gap between what we're teaching our students, which we know, and and the economy that's going to thrive in the future. And you try to close that gap. The Higher Education Board is trying to do that. There's great work being done at the University of Massachusetts. So as I said, I look to today, higher minimum wage, that's important, but you also need to look to the future. And it's that kind of, I think, capacity. I think the outsiderness of me, is that a word? Outsiderness of me?
I know what it means. Well, it's a word
that's
for this
not our
program.
slogan. I will tell you that's not our campaign slogan. But the fact that I have worked with, states, localities, 44, I've been to 44 other states. There's a lot of creativity that sometimes gets lost if you're in politics too long.
Let me ask you about what one of your opponents, State Treasurer Steve Grossman, said, not specifically about you, but he said this: "I am the only Democratic candidate who offers a lifetime of proven leadership in strengthening our economy." He's talking about the real experience he's had as state treasurer. How would you answer that if that were to come up in a debate where he looked at you and says, "I've got experience, you don't"?
Well, let me just talk about myself. Steve Grossman is great. And just to be clear, I'm not running against anyone. It is a big field. And so let me just make my case. The creation of jobs is done in all sorts of ways. It could be private sector within government. So how have I done it is I've overseen big budgets in which you in which you invest in a regional and city and state specific job creation efforts that build long-term momentum for job creation. So how have I done that? So, for example, in technology and military, I actually was responsible, when I oversaw the National Guard, of moving the National Guard from it was in Milford, and it made no sense because we have Hanscom, and moving it so that our military efforts were combined in one place so that you have both the economic activity and the safety and security activity. In terms of interoperability and technology, investing in the companies that are going to, short term link our public safety agencies together. We saw how important that was during the Boston Marathon, but long term drive creativity in the industry. So there's just, government isn't, a hammer to a nail, right? It takes a certain amount of being able to engage a lot of stakeholders in the effort, and that's what I've done. I've done it with states and localities here. I've done it, during the oil spill, when I oversaw the 5 states and their reaction as 5 Republican governors. I mean, you have to work with people who may not be, yes, Bobby Jindal and I, for a long summer that summer, but that's what you have to do though, because people want you to do it. And that's why I'm running.
Let me, we're calling this our lightning round, if you don't mind. So we just want to tick through 3 or 4, maybe 5, really quick questions. So try to be brief here. Okay. Do you support lifting the cap on charter schools?
Yes.
You do. Okay, that was a really quick answer.
Well,
I commend you.
No, because no one ever answers questions in politics. Let me tell you why. The idea that education reform has come down to a quota number is ridiculous. It is bad for the teachers and the teachers' unions to pit them against charter school, and it is bad for the charter schools, which are doing a lot of ingenuity. Not all of them are great, and as we know, not all public schools are great. What we need to focus on is not this question. That's why I answer it quickly, because I'd like to move on and talk about teacher training, supporting the teachers' unions for the kind of training that they need to teach our students better. And let me tell you, and to teach them, as we know, somewhat differently. I have 3 kids. I always say how they learn is so different than how I learned. That's not bad. We just have to adapt to it. So I now answered long, but
that's okay.
I just think it's a red herring sometimes.
All right. No, I appreciate that. So here's another one. MCAS. Would you keep it? Would you make it better? Would you get rid of it?
Oh, I definitely keep some form of testing. I have kids in the public school. I think it's important. I think it helps principals figure out where there's gaps in the education I know that we're going to be switching to potentially new tests. I'll be honest with you, I don't know the details of the benefits of MCAS versus another, but I would definitely support assessments. And look, we do this in every other field. Like, you guys have assessments, I have everyone has assessments, and a way to sort of get students just at least some barometer, or minimum test of where they might be, so that you can see gaps. They're not perfect. We need to support creativity in our public schools, as I'm well aware of. But let me say it's a minimum.
Here's a question that just came in on Twitter from Sunny A. Gracie. What's your position on our current gun laws?
Oh, they're not strong enough. I support the governor on his reforms, on his proposed reforms. And this is why this state is pretty remarkable. If I could just say that I have traveled to a lot of other states. We are amazing in what we do in terms of progressive politics, from obviously gay marriage to immigration reform to the push for gun policy that the governor did not get where he wanted to get is no fault of this governor. And as a governor, you keep pushing the progressive politics. I was a civil rights attorney when I started off. You keep pushing those progressive politics because I'll tell you, other states look to us. We are not like other states. They look to us, and we we reflect what's best in the United States. So in terms of gun control, the one purchase a month seems to me to be relatively easy. The semi-automatic and the gun, what do you call it? The gun
assault
sales.
Weapon ban.
Yes, no. The gun sales. I'm sorry, I went blank.
I know what you're talking about.
Gun sales.
The gun show.
Yes,
the gun show loophole
issue. Yeah. So all of those are right. That's why we need to do it federally as well. But the federal government is, one could say, safely, not something to rely on right now. And so a governor needs to push as far as he or she can. Last
sort of question from what we're calling this lightning round. Yes. What's the first thing you'd cut from the state budget?
Oh, wow. I haven't been asked that yet. So I'm not going to, no, this is, so I've overtaken a lot of offices and looked at budgets. So I'm not going to answer that question, not because I don't know now, but because the whole point of taking over from someone as strong and successful as Governor Deval Patrick is, one, you're not going to throw everything under the bus, and two, new eyes are always helpful.
Sure.
And so this is what I do when I take over new office. I look at the budget and I see what it looks like, and I look at the people who you hire and that you appoint who are actually delivering the services. So I can't answer that now, but I do promise a budget review.
Fair enough. I want to ask you about Deval Patrick's legacy. Obviously, a fairly popular government. He appointed you. I assume you admire him. But let me ask you this, and to make the question a little harder. Where has he fallen short? What would you like to improve upon?
So I like the second one better. As if you can't tell yet, I'm a you keep pushing person, right? And so no, I think it's important that I think that you look at what, if I became governor, you look at what's left. There are areas that obviously the new governor is going to have to revisit, like pre-K, which did not get the funding you want. So where I would focus a lot of efforts is on adaptation to climate change, and I don't do that because I'm a disaster-related person. I do that because it is not the luxury of the next governor to ignore the changes that are going to happen to the state and in Boston and elsewhere in the state because of climate change. And so what you have to do is you have someone in your office who needs to own it, right? I am someone who would focus on adaptation as a state policy drive, zoning rules, regulations, budgets, regional planning. That's really hard to do in a home rule state, but you got to do it from the state house to help cities and towns who are dealing with it on their own. To me, that is both a job creator. It is also something that, the day after, we ought to ask the next governor why they didn't pay attention. So that's something that I would focus on.
Juliette Kayyem, we have about a minute left, and we like to spend a little time with sort of what we're calling some fun facts, sort of, let's get to know this person who wants to be governor and who we might be sort of sharing the state with for the next 4 years or so. What are your hobbies? What do you like to do for fun?
I have three kids, 12, 10, and 7. Let's see, soccer.
No hobbies.
No hobbies. I watch The Good Wife late at night. I'm a long distance runner, and I like country music, and I listen, and I sort of just listen to that when I run. I'm a late-in-life surfer. I learned how to surf and paddleboard. That sort of relaxes me. I've been here all my adult life in Massachusetts, minus working for President Obama and President Clinton, but I did grow up in California, so I can get into a bad mood in February, as my husband says. So that's what I do, but mostly it's the kids and their fun.
I got to ask you one quick thing. So we noticed on your Twitter feed you were responding to the hashtag confess your unpopular opinion, and you tweeted last August, I am and will always be Team Aniston.
I have a wonderful first husband, and I love being his first wife.
Okay, very good. We'll leave it at that. That's Juliette Kayyem, Democratic candidate for governor. Thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And listeners, you can post your comments at radioboston.org. Stay with us. Coming up, a plan to avoid government default. We'll get the latest from Maine's independent Senator Angus King. I'm Anthony Brooks with Sasha Pfeiffer. This is Radio Boston.